right, good, great. Well, welcome everyone. We're trying the conference call thing this time because that'll make it so that Kaya and I can both talk at the same time. We're still working through all these different logistics. So Kaya Rabane is on the call as well, and she'll be doing most of the presentation for this webinar, but I just wanted to do a quick introduction. So Kaya, do you want to go to the next screen and just make sure that everyone knows how to use the webinar things? It's either on your right or left. I can't remember. It says on the left, but those little blue people are all of you, so you can see who's here. Right above where you can see the presentation, there's a little picture that says maximize, and if you want to maximize your screen, you'll be able to see it the best. You just won't be able to see the chat down below, but I'm going to disable that once Kaya gets started anyway. And then our preference is to answer questions at the end unless it's really pressing. And so if you want to type your question anytime during the call, that's fine, and then we'll take them at the end unless it looks like something's urgent. And if you're having any technical difficulties, you can type them in the question, and I'll be monitoring them as we go, and I could try to help you. But you can also use the service at support@anymeeting.com if it's giving you a lot of trouble. So far, things have been working pretty well for us, and we've been doing these since March. So I just wanted to give you a few quick updates and announcements. Most of you are new, but so some of you already know me, but I live in Eureka, California, and I'm on the Move to Amend Executive Committee, and I'm kind of the point person for the field coordination. So probably you've gotten emails from me before. And Kaya is on that team as well. Margaret Koster, who's on this call, is also on that team. And so if you have questions afterwards, we can all help you out. In May, we had a drive to collect a number of signatures, and we collected 15,488. I just wanted to explain for some of you who have been following why the number on the front of the website looks like we didn't really move, and our goal had been to get to 125,000, and you can see when you take the 15,000 and add it to the 111,000, we totally made that goal, but it doesn't show on the website, and that was because right as we were doing this, we had to make a switch over to the web site on the back end of things, and to make a long story short, what we found is we had a ton of duplicate signatures. So the counter was wrong before, and all those duplicate signatures had mostly happened at the beginning when we had so many people coming in that they were getting frustrated that their number didn't show up right away, and so they were hitting the button a bunch of times. So all in all, there were almost 12,000 duplicates. So that's what sort of canceled it out, but we made the judgment call that we wanted to go to a correct counter. So the number is correct now, and we sort of made our goal in terms of collecting a huge amount of signatures in May, but at the same time, it didn't show up. So that's the explanation for that. And I want to just remind everyone that if you're part of a group that is doing local work, to please remember to affiliate, and there's details on the website about that. And just to mark in your calendar, August 24th through 28th in Madison, Wisconsin, we're going to be doing a really exciting event called the Democracy. Convention. Move to Amend is spearheading the Constitutional Reform Conference that is a sub-event within that Democracy Convention. There's basically going to be 9 conferences at one time, and it'll also be an opportunity for affiliates to have an in-person gathering and meeting. So please find out about that, and we'd love to see you in Madison. So there will be details about all of the examples for creative action that Kaya's going to go through in this webinar on the movetoamend.org/July 4 link that just got put up about an hour ago. So I encourage you to, as soon as this call is over, check that out. So I'm going to turn it over to Kaya now to do the rest of this presentation. And again, if you have questions as we go, you can type them, and then we'll answer them at the end. Great, thanks, Caitlin. So yeah, my name's Kaya Rebana, and as Caitlin said, I think she said, I'm in South Central Wisconsin Move to Amend, which is a local affiliate in Madison, Wisconsin. Well, really based around Madison. We have folks from various different communities in the area. So basically what we're going to do today is I'm going to give first an overview of July 4th actions in general and why we are encouraging groups to actually do actions on July 4th. Then we'll talk a little bit about why creativity is actually worth the extra effort. Then I'll go through a series of different ideas for creative actions, which you can take as is or modify or just use as a kind of inspiration for your own actions. Then some questions to ask when planning your event, what to do after your event, and some. And after the final notes, I will take questions. Okay, so the July 4th actions overall are themed Declare Your Independence from Corporate Rule. Now, July 4th is a natural match to our campaign, as you can probably figure out for yourselves. July 4th, for many people, symbolizes freedom and democracy in the United States, and basically all those things that we are fighting for as we push for an amendment to the Constitution. Also, it's a great date for fun and creative events. You know, the weather often is good, and people are in a festive mood, and a lot of times families and individuals are looking for fun ways to enjoy the holiday. So if you put something together that is, you know, fun and also educational, of course, then hopefully, you know, you can get some good attendance at it. And our goal here really is just to do these types of events, fun things, but also educational things across the country. Now, you might ask why, you know, should we bother to be creative? Because as we all know, doing the same old thing is often a lot easier. You know, our resources are all limited, and our time is valuable. And so, you know, why bother? You know, why bother to use that extra brain power to come up with something different? Well, basically, we bother because there are a lot of benefits to doing creative actions, doing something a little bit different. One of those is that creativity really does attract attention. This means hopefully increased attendance at your event. It also can mean, you know, more media coverage because the media, of course, are looking for good stories, and if you give them a good story, they're more likely to run with it, and that helps you get your message out. Also, people in general are more likely to remember your message. All of us just naturally tend to think in narratives. We tend to think in stories, and we want to, you know, kind of be able to identify with, you know, the good guys that are fighting against the bad guys, and there's some kind of struggle or conflict, and then there's some kind of thing at the end that resolves the conflict. And if you put things into that kind of narrative structure, chances are people will remember what you're trying to say much better than if you just give them a pile of facts or even a very good watertight logical argument. So, you know, while there's definitely places for fact and logical argument, putting it into a story can also help, and there are a lot of creative ways to get a story across. Also, if you do creative events, that can really energize your own members, you know, the people that are putting on the event, because, you know, it's fun and it's energizing. Also, it can help you recruit new members, because people naturally like to join groups that do fun and interesting things. And there's a lot of options for what people can do with their time, and if you can, you know, show folks that you are a group that are doing, you know, awesome actions that are really a lot of fun, chances are they'll choose your group rather than going and doing something else. In addition, creative events in general can widen the spectrum of tasks that you know, you need to do in your organization. And that's good because it can really give an outlet for more people's talents. So chances are you have people in your organization, you know, or potential members with a really broad array of diverse talents. You know, maybe not everybody is good at or wants to be, you know, in charge of, say, chairing meetings or putting together presentations or giving speeches or, you know, creating flyers. Maybe people have other talents that could be used to get the message of, you know, corporate personhood and the need for a constitutional amendment across. So that can really broaden, you know, the number of outlets available for those talents. Also, in the category of fundraising, if you do something creative and fun, a lot of times people will be more willing to, you know, donate to your organization. So if you have an actual, say, event, which is, say, a play or a concert or something else, and it's an enjoyable experience, people come and they enjoy themselves, and then they're more likely to be willing to kind of, you know, give money because they've already kind of gotten something on the emotional level in return, rather than you just sending them an email and, say, asking for money. So, like I said, I'm going to go through various different creative suggestions in no particular order,
And you can use these on July 4th or on other dates also, and a lot of them could be used at different times in the year. And you're welcome to use these as they are, or to modify them in whatever way fits your local circumstances, or to even just use these as a starting point for your own brainstorming and come up with something different entirely. First one is parade. Now, a lot of communities have parades on the 4th of July, so you don't necessarily need to organize your whole parade for yourself to do this. You can march in a parade that's already organized by somebody else. So look into what parades are available, and if you still can get a spot in a July 4th parade, then great. And of course, this might mean marching, having a group of people marching with some kind of costumes and maybe giving out flyers. You can use puppets, like larger than life depictions of corporate persons or the Supreme Court or what have you. You can make a float, whether that means just dressing up a pickup truck or something, or actually going the extra mile and making something more elaborate. All those things are options. A couple of ideas for what your theme in a parade might be. You could have, for example, Supreme Court justices dancing with corporate persons. You could have a corporate person, maybe in a large puppet or something like that, singing "This land is my land, this land is my land," something kind of funny like that. You could even have a corporate person of some kind of corporate persons with a puppet of Uncle Sam, or have Uncle Sam on a leash or something like that. I mean, for all of these, it is really important, once again, to stress that the purpose of this is, educational and to organize and mobilize people. So, give flyers or, have some kind of thing that conveys the message of the need for a constitutional amendment along with these things. Another idea is "I Miss Democracy." This is basically a woman with a tiara and a sash reading "I Miss Democracy," along the lines of kind of a beauty pageant, like "I Miss America," or rather Miss America, not "I Miss America." And of course, again, you want to accompany this with information about Citizens United or corporate personhood, or probably all of these things, constitutional amendment. And this one you can do in a number of different ways. This might be as simple as one person in a costume at a rally or at some other event. You could base a parade float around this very easily, or you could go all out and have a whole event. It's like a beauty pageant, or rather an "I Miss Democracy" pageant. Here's one example from, let's see, this is Kansas City with, I believe it's Iowa Move to Amend, that this woman was affiliated with, and the message comes across pretty well. She's standing there: "I miss democracy, tired of corporations running our country." I mean, what else do you need to say, right? Here's another example from Vermont, I believe it is, and obviously this is a parade float, so that's another way you can take this idea and run with it. And here's another example from a while back with Code Pink, which is another organization, anti-war organization. And they have an "I Miss America, I Miss Democracy, and I Miss Clean Air." So a little different take on it, but as you can see, they've got these large puppets that really are attention-grabbing, and all of them dressed in gowns and such. So really great way to get people's attention. Now, if you're going to do the whole pageant, the "I Miss Democracy" pageant, here are some ideas you could get started with. And to my knowledge, I don't know of anybody who's actually done a full pageant, so if you do it, I would love to hear about how that goes. Basically, what you could do is a skit with female contestants who are trying to impress corporate judges. And you might even want to have them looking kind of uncomfortable in the process. It's up to you. Each of these contestants could introduce herself with a short speech about her pro-corporate interests. She could say such things as, "I love walks on private beaches," or "I think my most important asset is my intellectual property," or "I want to help disadvantaged corporations around the world," etc. In the program, you could base loosely around the Miss America program. Basically, in that competition, there is an evening wear segment, a talent segment, and a time when they have to answer questions. So the evening wear segment could easily be replaced by a corporate logo attire portion. Maybe you want to make your own corporate logo attire, even putting logos on evening wear, or just do kind of a fashion show sort of thing of existing corporate logos on clothing, which of course there's a ton of out there. In the talent portion, you could have your contestants say sing a song, well-known song with pro-corporate type lyrics, change the lyrics around a bit, some kind of dance, maybe a ballroom dance with a corporate person, something like that. And in the question portion, obviously you can ask kind of corporate themed questions and probably come up with some witty responses back on those. And at the end of it all, You could have the winner receive a I Miss Democracy sash, of course, and maybe also a tiara featuring large dollar signs, or bouquet of dollar bills, or roses with dollar bills, or something along those lines. So there's lots of ideas there that I think could really make a fun event. And this would also work well probably as a fundraiser. Another idea, a corporate personhood picnic. The 4th of July is a really great time for a picnic. And this could be something you could bill as a fun event for corporate and human guests. And you could offer, themed food and drink. Just a few examples. You could come up with a lot more, I'm sure. Pro-business burgers, corporate coleslaw, tax break burritos, proprietary potato chips, limited liability lemonade. You get the idea. You could also have different games. Some examples might be race to the bottom. If you're racing to the bottom of the hill, please be careful. Maybe it's better to put the bottom sign on a tree and race to that, but, you be the judge. Pin the tax burden on the working family, free market frisbee, corporate croquet. Maybe you could have a raffle. That would be a way to kind of integrate a fundraising component into this as well. And you could actually have some more real sorts of prizes, but educational things perhaps, like books on corporate personhood. There's some good examples out there.
Kaya, can I just chime in for 1 second?
Yeah.
There, on the website, I also added, there's actually a rights race that we do in workshops sometimes that you could do at something like this. And there's also a pin the crime on the corporation game that one of our Move to Amend steering committee folks did last 4th of July. So those materials are on the website as well.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. Okay, so moving on, corporate human wedding is another example. You can have a corporate groom marry a human bride. This basically, of course, focuses attention on how ridiculous corporate personhood is. And you could also have two corporations marry each other, for that matter. One example comes out of Florida, Move to Amend, and to my knowledge is the first attempt at a corporate human wedding. A single woman down there basically decided to take the Supreme Court at its word that corporations are persons too. And so she, along with Move to Amend and a couple other organizations, mounted a national search for a corporate groom. They launched this search using a press conference, and they really did get a lot of media coverage out of it. So it was a really great way to get the story of corporate personhood and Citizens United out to people. Also here in Madison, we last spring we did a ceremony, corporate human wedding ceremony as well. And this was basically a humorous skit that was on stage at a local venue that often has concerts and such things at it. And just a few kind of highlights: we had the Supreme Court give away the bride. We had someone dressed up as democracy who objected to the wedding quite vocally. The vows were a contract, very long contract, lots of fine print, and of course the bride was told not to read the fine print and just to sign. And the ring, when the bride held her hand out for the ring, instead of getting a ring around her finger, she got a ring around her neck, meaning a collar with a leash on it, and then the ring bearer handed the leash to the groom at the corporation. So a lot of kind of just fun stuff in there. There was also live music during and after the ceremony. We had dancing, we had wedding cake, and basically it was a lot of fun. But it was also educational, and we distributed quite a bit of information about what at that point was an upcoming election with a referendum on the ballot, and we also used it as a fundraiser and did pretty well there. And by the way, the script is available for that. It's a little Wisconsin-specific, but it could easily be modified for use in other areas. So if you are interested in looking at that or maybe using it in your local area, that can be, Caitlin has it, I have it, or you could use the contact us form through the Move to Amend website if you can't remember how to contact us.
I actually put it on the website too, so it's already there.
It's on the website. Well, fantastic. Then you just go to the website and get it. All right. Here's just a photo of our corporate wedding with our bride looking a little bit apprehensive as she's looking at the groom with her bouquet of dollar bills in her hands. And that's our corporate groom. He's got a Vote for Prosser button on. Prosser was the pro-corporate candidate for a Supreme Court race that was coming up. And he's got dollar bills in his pocket and what have you. And we had a whole bunch of other characters in the wedding, of course, too, but those are the main two. So for a corporate human wedding, you could take this in a lot of different directions. Obviously, you can do a standalone event, which is what we did. Have it at a concert hall or something, or a bar or whatever. You could do some smaller version of this on a parade float. You could perform a skit for community groups or school children. You could perform something at events, festivals or farmers markets or whatever. And you could even do a skit outside of your state capitol during the lunch hour and send wedding invitations to all the legislators and staffers beforehand, inviting them to come and, be a part of the ceremony or be a part of the program, rather. You can also, when you're doing this, just once again, of course, everything that we're doing really should be educational to people, and it's great to give people something they can take home that has information and, website addresses on it and what have you. And for a wedding, you could basically dress that up as a program, with information about the different characters, and also about, the issues. Okay. Now, another idea is a birthday party for democracy, and this obviously would probably make sense to have it on July 4th. On this, you can do the whole birthday party thing. You can have balloons and birthday cake and streamers and whatever else usually goes along with a birthday party. And just have one person dressed as democracy, whatever that means to you, of course, you can use. But the way that we dressed democracy up for our corporate wedding was a woman with a white dress on with an American flag draped across her shoulders and a tiara. So that seemed to get the concept across, but maybe you could think of something better. Also, you might want to have the Supreme Court justices, at least those 5 of them, who voted for a Citizens United decision, crash the party. You could have them even come along with some rude corporate persons who basically, come in and are kind of nasty and do nefarious things like trying to steal ice cream from children or otherwise being disruptive. And together they might try to kidnap democracy and, say, drag her off or him off. And you could have the partygoers then chase off, the justices and the corporate persons and save democracy, and then have everybody sing happy birthday to democracy at the end. Another option is an art show, kind of a different thing, not so much live theater, but, something still very creative. And you could take this in various directions as well. Some possible themes are corporate persons, is money speech, the Citizens United decision, or maybe just how to rescue our democracy from corporate rule. In whatever you do, it's helpful to pick a theme because that kind of is something that the artists can, build their own pieces around and that you can build the whole show as. So rather than just saying it's everything having to do with any of these themes, you probably want to pick some kind of central theme. As for location, there are various options available. You do something in a library or a coffee shop or an art gallery if you have, the right connections or you're really persuasive, or public spaces of different kinds. And when you recruit artists, there's various ways you can reach out to people. Certainly, send things over listservs. You can put something in newsletters announcing the exhibit and asking for submissions. You could reach out to any college or university art departments that happen to be near you and ask them to publicize it. Use your personal connections, etc. But get the word out and basically invite any artist that is interested to contribute pieces to the show. And then, of course, it's nice to have a reception with some food and beverage when you open the show. And that's a great opportunity also to reach out and, educate people more about the issues. So you can have somebody give a little talk about constitutional amendment or what have you there and give out flyers. And here in Madison, we did do this actually last February. Yeah, last February. And the whole thing, it was really great. The artists that came and contributed were really talented, and there was some great work there. And the whole thing was more or less put together by one of our members. Her name is Mary. And she did the vast majority work by herself. So, she worked hard in it, but this basically is not something that has to necessarily occupy your whole organization for 2 months straight. This is something that you can put together with, a reasonable amount of effort, not, huge effort required necessarily. But she just basically reached out in her own networks and in the other ways I mentioned to recruit artists and got the space in a coffee shop, and it was really great. And people really, enjoyed themselves and got some really great public education and art out of it. Another kind of similar idea, a little different though, is to have a children's art contest or a children's poetry contest, or both. And what that can do is basically, educate children certainly, but also their parents and the general public. And just, growing up, I should just say that I was kind of the young artist and entered a lot of art contests when I was a kid. So, basically these things can be publicized through teachers and, just art classes. You can go directly to, parents in different ways, publicize things through organizations, post notices, etc., saying, hey, this is art contest. And generally, folks that have kids that might be interested in entering these, a lot of times will kind of watch these things. So And whenever you distribute information, do make sure to distribute information about the topic along with the rules and offer additional background, probably on a website or whatever, because a lot of people won't know about the subject even if they're interested in participating. So you do need to give people that background information. Also, would suggest to offer some kind of prizes in the contest that just kind of, for the kids, it gives a little bit more motivation and makes it seem a little bit more official, although it's your call. I remember common prizes when I was a kid were things like ribbons. That was the most common, and trophies and plaques are also nice for maybe the top couple of entries. You could also do a small cash prize if you want. Again, when I was a kid, I remember, for a few contests, the first place winner would get $50 or something, but totally up to you. But, some kind of thing to say, hey, you somehow won can be useful. Your call. Also, another idea is to see if a local newspaper will publish the winner's work, along, hopefully, with a short story about the issues. And if you can get the newspaper to buy in early enough, you can actually use that as part of the prize to say the top 10 entries or top 5 or whatever it is will be published in such and such newspaper. So, because that's, when you're a little kid, if you're second grade or fifth grade or whatever, that's actually a really big deal and a big motivating factor. When all said and done, you've got the entries and you've, sorted through them and everything. Of course, displaying them is good. Somewhere with public traffic, probably with some background information so people can interpret what they're seeing, actually related to the issues at hand. Schools, libraries, coffee shops, public buildings, anywhere like that can work for this. And for poetry, you could also print out the poems and display them similarly. You could also, for poetry, have a reading where the children themselves are invited to come and perform their poetry for people. And then finally, for either art or poetry, it could be really good to have a reception, which could also double as an award ceremony if you are giving awards. And of course, that is another opportunity for further education and involvement of people. And you can invite local reporters too and see if they'll do a story on the event. Okay, and I just wanted to really quickly mention, by the way, people probably understand this, but I will get to your questions at the end. So for folks that are putting questions in, I will definitely get to them eventually. So don't worry. Okay, bake sale is another option. This can be pretty simple. It can be just kind of a fun way to table. Usually when you have a table and you're just passing out literature, all you're giving people is literature. But if you have baked goods, it's like another reason for people to come up and look at what you have and maybe make a donation, or maybe you're selling these baked goods. And then, of course, you can give them a flyer with every purchase. It also, of course, doubles as a fundraiser, and it really can bring new people into your organization, and more than you might think. I was involved with a bake sale kind of along these lines with another organization I'm involved with a few years back, and it was really pretty amazing how many people had not yet really dared to come to a meeting or otherwise get involved. But as soon as we said, hey, we need some cupcakes and cakes and pies and cookies and whatever, can you cook some and bring them to us? People did. They all pitched in, and other people were willing to staff the table and hand out flyers and take donations. And a lot of those people actually ended up being core activists later on. Like, a number of them stuck around. So it really can bring new people in a different sort of way than just going and saying, hey, this issue is important, come join us. Although that's important too. And of course, you can combine this with a holiday theme if you want. You can do a 4th of July bake sale, you can do a Halloween bake sale, you can do some other kind of bake sale, and of course, dressing it up however you want to, with decorations or costumes or maybe even music, can, increase how much attention you get. Again, you can offer themed goodies, things like First Amendment fudge or free speech fudge, multinational muffins, company cupcakes with industrial icing, move to amend meringues. Let your imagination run wild. There's all kinds of options there. And just general kind of bake sale advice, not specifically move to amend bake sale. It's generally helpful to have a variety of different baked goods so that you don't just have cookies or whatever. And if you can get the ingredient lists for the things, just so that you can tell people that have allergies what's in things, that's helpful. So you can even just ask people to tape the ingredient list to the bottom of the plate that they bring in. If they bring in 3 plates of cupcakes, just tape it to the bottom. And you might also want to consider offering drinks. That's not so traditional, but if you're out at an event of some kind where there aren't other drinks available or there isn't water available, people can be really happy to get, maybe corporate coffee or lobbyist lemonade or whatever. And that can also increase, if you're doing this as a fundraiser, can also increase the amount of funds you raise. As for locations, pretty typical, organizations such as churches, schools, various clubs can be options. You can do these bake sales at events, concerts, festivals, meetings, athletic events, what have you, or just in busy public places. But wherever you decide to hold it, just make sure to look into what permission you need or what permits you might need ahead of time, and make sure to follow the local rules, because it may be in your community that you can't just set up a table legally anywhere and just start selling home-baked goods. So just make sure to look into that. But if you're having trouble with that, you might want to just talk to somebody at maybe your church or some local organization and say, well, what have you done in the past to have bake sales. Okay, a little bit different flavor, well, no pun intended, flavor of event, is to actually have a corporation run for office. This is something that can really highlight that issue of, how ridiculous corporate personhood is. And while the actual campaign is, of course, best in the season right before an election, you might want to, if you think this is a good idea, you might want to go ahead and, map out when your next election is and start planning for this. Because if you're actually going to try to file paperwork for your corporation to actually officially have them run or anything like that, you may need some lead time. And you may or may not actually succeed completely in filing that paperwork. It will probably depend on the local area. But if you do have any success at all, you could really use that to educate people. You might even want to consider videotaping your attempt when you go into the city clerk's office or whatever and try to, file the paperwork or whatever. So anyway, this can be educational and kind of interesting. The only corporation that I'm aware of that has actually done this is Murray Hill Inc., which is a small corporation based in the Washington, D.C. area. And they went ahead and tried to have their corporation run for Congress and did some videotaping and other things and got some substantial media coverage. They were on various shows and got a lot of print articles and what have you. So, you can check out their efforts at that website. And generally, if we have more folks nationally having corporations run for office, that really would drive home in those local areas, how ridiculous this issue is and how we need to fix it. So even if you don't decide to actually file paperwork, which you might not want to do for whatever reason, you could go ahead and just mount a campaign, a kind of a mock campaign anyway, as an effort to educate the public. I mean, anything you do, you should be educating the public anyway. But you can basically just make up a campaign and have your corporation and have a, person dressed as that corporation, maybe with a, box over their head with the name of the corporation written on it and the suit or whatever it is. You can have them, a person is dressed up as a corporation, meet voters at festivals and markets and busy locations, etc. You can also ask if your candidate can speak at events or meetings or rallies, or if you don't want to have your candidate speak, since corporate speech really is money, not real speech, you could just have the candidate stand there silently while their campaign manager speaks. Another idea is to host a debate with either a real candidate running in the same election or maybe between two corporate candidates. And you can imagine all kinds of interesting and educational things that a corporation might say if directly asked what they see as the priorities for the economy or for workers' rights or environmental protections or whatever it is. Also, of course, if you do this, definitely seek media coverage, because this is a story that the media can really sink their teeth into. So make a big deal of announcing the candidacy. Try, if you can, to get interviews in character, or however you can do that. Okay. Then another idea that could go in various directions is what I'm going to call flash mob with a purpose. As you may or may not know, flash mob is generally a group of people that will suddenly assemble in a public place and do something coordinated that, for the most part, is more or less pointless, maybe satirical, but it's usually pointless. In our case, we don't want it to be pointless. We want it to have a message and a purpose, hence flash mob with a purpose. So basically what you're looking at is a sudden gathering in a public place, and as a group, you perform some kind of act that sends a message. And again, the message could be specifically about about corporate personhood or about money being speech or whatever, or it could be a bit broader. And in any case, you do again want to make sure to educate people. So one good way to do this is to distribute flyers when you're doing this action, whether by the people involved in the action or other people that are there just to do flyers. And those flyers should contain information about the issues, but also they can help people connect the action that you're doing to these issues, because you might have an action that is very detailed and it's very obvious what's going on, Or you might have something that is simple and powerful but needs to be connected in people's minds to what's actually going on, with Citizens United and a constitutional amendment and what have you. So the goals here are really to surprise and educate people that are passing by, and you can also use a recording of the event to educate others. Here's just a few ideas for actions. One would be a pledge of allegiance to a corporation. You can gather a whole bunch of people in one spot and have them all turn around at once and recite a pledge of allegiance to a corporation. You could have a group talk to people silently while handing them fake money, and that fake money could actually have educational, information on the back side. So that's the whole money being speech thing, right? You could have a group stand silently with the tape over their mouth and with a dollar sign written on that to symbolize, how our speech is being drowned out by big corporate special interest money. And those people also could walk around handing out flyers themselves. You could also do a musical action. That might be a sing-along that involves people passing by. You could modify various songs that are well-known to be about these different issues, about corporate personhood or what have you, and just distribute songbooks as people are coming up. Say, hey, we're having a sing-along, join us. You could also do a musical theater-style number with like song and dance and what have you. And this is something that has been used quite a number of times in the last couple of years very effectively by different groups trying to make different points. So if you go on YouTube, you can probably find quite a number of these. But that can be really, really powerful. And honestly, that sort of thing, if you have something musical theater style and successful, or frankly any of these things that you do well, can also be really good to get online, like on YouTube or whatever. And those things can oftentimes go viral very fast. So you might end up reaching a lot more people with your message than actually saw your action. So in any case, if you're doing something musical, obviously want to make it educational. One really good way to do that is to have educational lyrics in addition to whatever kinds of flyers you're handing out or what have you. And especially if you're thinking about things going on to online later or what have you, people that are watching it on YouTube may not have the flyer, probably won't. So you do want to make sure that you get your message across somehow. Also, encourage you to check out other people's work for inspiration. If you go again on YouTube and just search for flash mob, you'll probably find quite a number of things. And one group that has some interesting things that are not political but are just kind of fun to watch is Improv Everywhere, and the website is improveverywhere.com. So you could check that one out as well. Now my computer's. There we go. Okay. Okay, so basically, talked about a number of different ideas, and I'm going to just go through a few more slides and then get to your questions. But before I do that, I wanted to go over a few questions to kind of just ask yourself as you're planning any kind of creative event. First one is, besides having fun, what are you trying to accomplish? I keep mentioning education, that's definitely one. Things like recruiting more members or, mobilizing people to do some particular action, whatever. These are all your goals, and it's really important to keep your goals in mind. And certainly you want to some degree, to get you want to get into this like action and really brainstorming and having fun with it, but you also want to make sure that you're actually still doing what you originally set out to do. Another thing to ask yourself is, what is the underlying narrative? And trying to articulate that as clearly as possible. And this might be really clear in something like that has a skit with a really complicated plot, but it might be a lot less clear if it's just a message consisting of a sign taped on front of a float with something happening on the float in a parade. So basically just ask yourself, well, who's the protagonist? Who's the good guy? Who's the antagonist? Who's the bad guy? What's the conflict, and what is the resolution? And the resolution very likely might be, actually amending the Constitution eventually, or, taking our democracy back. So the protagonist might just be we the people, or maybe we the people and democracy personified, or whatever. But basically try to articulate that, and then ask yourself if it can be strengthened, if it can be made more compelling, and also make sure that it clearly relates to your actual message. So if you have a really complicated skit with a plot, try to relate that to actually, what you want, what the message is you want to send. And the message you want to send is presumably, we have X, Y, and Z issues. They are here because of corporate personhood and the idea that money is speech and lack of real democracy in our country. And here's how we fix it. We're going to amend the Constitution. Another question to ask is this nonpartisan? Because in amending the Constitution, we are going to need to appeal to a very broad audience. So, we basically will need all kinds of people on board. And honestly, this is not a partisan issue. People across the political spectrum care about our democracy and want to fix it and realize there's things wrong, and oftentimes will be very much in favor of amending the Constitution. So just doing a little check on that is good, because sometimes it's easy to get carried away in the creativity and end up with something that at least looks partisan to people that are going to be watching it. And then another question to ask is, what action do you want people to take? Be clear with your ask. If you want people to sign the petition, move to amend petition, which frankly should be, a major thing of whatever you're doing, bring that petition along and get people to sign it, ask them to sign it. Make sure that it's in a prominent place and that you ask people as they come in the door to sign it, or direct people to it, or whatever it is. You probably want their contact info. That'd be another thing. Maybe you want them to join your organization, or you want them to call their legislator, or whatever it is. Well, in this case, probably not your legislator, but you may want them to do something specific, right? Gather signatures for a resolution campaign, perhaps, something like that. Another question is, do you have good visuals, and will they photograph well? And so if you don't, if you have a bunch of Supreme Court justices marching in a parade, and the only real costume going on is our black graduation robes, maybe you can add something. Add a nice big colorful American flag, and maybe some corporate personhood costumes with a lot of color or something. Also, of course, how will you publicize the event? It's always something to think about. Will you engage the media, and if so, how? Personal contact with reporters, radio hosts, and others is good. You might also want to consider doing some press releases. And then, of course, will you record the event? And actually, this is really easy to overlook. So, will you record the event, and if so, how? I mean, it's really easy to be planning some great creative event, and then on the day before to say, wait a second, we need somebody to take pictures or take video, and shoot, who can do it? And, just try to find somebody, whoever, and just get them to do it. And that might not actually give you the best quality recordings later for whatever you decide to use them for. So actually thinking that through can be helpful. Do you want to actually post something on YouTube, for instance? Is it going to be video? If so, you probably want to shoot from more than one angle and try to get decent, sound on it and everything else. Or do you just want to put a few photos on your website? If that's the case, then you would not need to worry about the video. So think that through ahead of time. Of course, will you record people's contact information? Generally speaking, probably you will want to if you're in a position to do so. So think about what contact info you would like to have from them. And of course, if they're signing the petition, that already does have some contact info for them, but there may be additional information that you want as well. Also, what will you give people to take with them? For any kind of event or action, it's going to be more helpful for people to remember things if they can take something with them that will help them refresh their memory about what the message was. And also, of course, if you want to put your website or the Move to Amend website on there, or whatever it is, some kind of flyer or what have you is really useful. And on those materials, how is your organization identified? Obviously your name, your website, if you have a logo, that would be good. Also, sometimes if you're doing a longer-term campaign, and you say have a logo of your local organization that is, say, green and white, you may want to pick green as the predominant color for your flyers, because people will start associating that. But that's just a thought. Oh, and I think I skipped the bullet. Is your message clear? Basically, you just want to make sure that whatever it is that you're trying to get across is clear, naturally.
This is Caitlin. Just one thing on the materials to give people. We do have a Declaration of Independence from Corporate Rule that was created for last year's 4th of July, and that's up on the website for the page for this year. And we have it in poster, it's larger, and then handbill form. So that's something that you could potentially use and then put specifics on the back for either your local group or directly relating back to whatever the event is that you're doing.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Caitlin. And finally, who is responsible for the different tasks? So obviously you want to plan your event carefully. I mean, some events will have a lot of moving parts and you want things to go off well. So plan it carefully, but also spread the work around among, many people. And sometimes it's easier for just a few people to, that already have done events before, or maybe have really, a lot of skills in the area of writing or speaking or whatever, to do all those things themselves. But by spreading it around, spreading it among many people, you actually are able to, basically have different people take ownership of the event and get some experience in doing some of this kind of activism. And as you're doing that, of course, be conscious of skills and leadership development among all of your members and the people that are participating, because, it may be that, whoever, Anne is very good, I'm trying to pick a name of somebody not in our organization. So let's say that Anne is very, really skilled at doing fundraising or what have you. But maybe she shouldn't be the only one doing it just because she's good at it. Bring in a couple of other people and have Anne mentor those other people and give them some responsibility as well. Okay, and then finally, after your event, of course, celebrate your success. When something goes well, you should feel good about it. And even if it doesn't go perfectly, you just did something that educated people and helped get the message out, and hopefully, met some other goals as well. So really do celebrate that. Make sure to thank everybody who pitched in, and just, be really clear that we couldn't have done this without everybody. And then also it'd be great if you could share what you do with Move to Amend with us. If you have photos or videos or links to, articles in the media, we'd appreciate having the best ones. Send those our way. We don't need all 200 photos that you took, but maybe the top 2 would be nice. Excuse me. Also, if you did something creative that others might want to replicate, let us know about that too. And any lessons that you learned that you really think could help other people. So, if you take one of these ideas that I mentioned today and run with that and come up with something creative, that's something that other people might want to do as well. And maybe you'll come up with something totally unique and different. I know a lot of you will. In that case, also it'd be great for us to know about that, so that we could, let other people know, and maybe they'll want to, to basically do something similar in the future. Okay, so really quickly, final notes. I am going to take questions after this slide, and after the question period, if you stick around, which I hope you will, there will be a survey, and you'll be automatically directed to that survey as soon as we end the question period. So if you can stick around and then complete the survey, that would be really helpful for those of us who plan these things to know how we did, and kind of help us plan for future webinars. Also, the next webinar is the first Tuesday of next month. They are the first Tuesday of every month. That's the plan at the moment anyway, and for the near future, that's how it will be. The topic of the next one is basically organizing tips. How do you effectively organize your local group? So that's what we'll be talking about. I hope you'll join us. It'll be Tuesday, July 5th at those times, depending on your time zone. And then if you do have any questions, of course, feel free to contact Move to Amend, either that email address or calling that number, or just through the website. So at that point, that is my last slide, I think. Whoops, yes, and I will put that back up. Well, okay, while I mess with this, I will take questions now. So let me just, actually, I'll just leave it there. Okay, let me see. And I'm going to go ahead and read the question and answer it, or ask Caitlin to chime in, and she may chime in anyway. So we'll both be doing these collaboratively, just so people know what's coming. So, do you have T-shirts made up that we could order, and what about banners? Caitlin, to my knowledge, there's no current T-shirts or banners to order. Am I mistaken about that?
That's correct. What we've talked about is doing actually a T-shirt competition for ideas, and that's not going to be something that we'll have ready by the 4th of July, but it is something that we're hoping to have those printed up by the Democracy Convention. So stay tuned for that. And banners, we do have a banner, and if your local group would like to pay for getting one printed, we could work that out, Mary Beth, because we do have a few, and we could use the same design if you wanted some local ones.
Okay, so let me take, what are some recent examples of some recent cases where corporations have used their constitutional rights to thwart popular will? Need examples for a skit. We have quite a number of resources on the Move to Amend website. For example, there's one document on basically ways that corporations have used corporate personhood to thwart environmental protections, and there's quite a number of other ones. And I could go through some specifics, but Caitlin, do you want to add anything before I do, maybe to just direct people to resources they can look at?
Yeah, there were a lot of materials that I put together for the 125th anniversary of corporate personhood call to action, and so if folks go to that page on the website, you can see a lot of the materials there. So the one that Kaya just mentioned about corporate personhood and the environment is there. There's also our timeline. I mean, there's there's a case in Vermont in the 90s when Vermont tried to pass a law requiring bovine growth hormone milk to be labeled, that the Supreme Court overturned, and that's a pretty good one because it's just about labeling, and that resonates with a lot of people. There's also one from the early 90s, I believe, as well, about PG&E here in California. getting a law that required energy-saving tips to be printed on envelopes overturned, and both of those were because they violated their free speech. And then there also was the Nike v. Kasky case where Nike was claiming a right to lie. That wasn't ultimately that got settled before the Supreme Court ruled on it, but lower courts ruled in favor of Nike, and it was a California case that went up to federal court. So those are kind of three examples that are pretty mainstream and that are easy to understand. And there are some older ones that are available, again, through the website. And there was an earlier webinar, which I think you were on, Mary Beth, where it talks about some of the cases, again, from further back. But if you want more recent examples, those are probably the three best ones, especially that deal with the First Amendment.
Great. Thanks, Galen. Okay, so what are examples of actions on the part of politicians that serve corporate interests despite the majority of voters endorsing an opposing position? Well, there are a lot of examples of this. I mean, if you look at honestly, the news of what politicians in D.C. or in your state are doing, you'll probably find a lot of examples. Just a couple of quick examples. For instance, on the whole healthcare debate, the fact that a public option was, not really ever seriously considered, despite a majority of people, voters wanting it. The fact that single-payer healthcare was never, really an option that was even considered seriously, while it polls very well among people. Those kinds of things are, are pretty easily grasped examples of how you've got pharmaceutical companies and health insurance companies that are getting more of a say in Congress than the rest of us. Also, another example would be BP with the oil spill on the Gulf, and the fact that it created this big disaster, and then it manages to avoid any kind of really serious any really serious payment or responsibility in that. And anything like that works pretty well, because honestly that's the case. I mean, you've got a situation where, because of campaign contributions and because of the power that gives lobbyists in the halls of our capitals, basically the voters' voices aren't heard as much. Caitlin, do you want to add something to that?
I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, I think some of the stuff that you're dealing with in Wisconsin is another good example of that too. Not that, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all in terms of Walker.
Oh, in terms of Walker? Scott Walker in Wisconsin, of course, that would be the governor here. Oh, there's just a whole lot of things here. I mean, the most kind of publicized kind of thing that he's been doing, of course, is trying to take away collective bargaining rights, and he's not alone in that. And that can easily be understood as basically, workplace democracy, people's ability to actually have a say in their working conditions. That, of course, takes away power from large corporations in general that employ workers, and there is this kind of conflict there. And so a lot of the sort of union busting actions that Governor Walker and other governors are taking can be traced pretty directly to these large corporations, large contributions that corporations are making in elections. So
I guess one other thing that I would add too is just that lots of times it's slightly different than what you're asking here about politicians acting for corporate interests instead of the public will, but there are lots of examples, like, for example, in Oregon, there was an attempt to pass a GMO labeling law that originally started out with, a lot of public support. The polling showed that it was totally passable through ballot initiative. And then once Dow and Monsanto and a number of corporate agribusiness dumped hundreds of thousands of dollars in to the state and to the campaign, public opinion, ultimately what happened is that law didn't pass. And so it's a little bit not maybe as direct as what you're looking for, but that also happens with, Walmart basically having politicians and elected officials will pass laws to restrict a big box coming in to try and to protect the community, and that'll be something, that'll be sort of the will of the public, and then Walmart will basically have those laws overturned through the ballot initiative process, and again by spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's a number of communities that have seen that happen as well. So it's not quite the same, but it basically does show directly that people have one opinion, and then when corporations spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, most of the time is what we're talking about, it shifts that public opinion through their propaganda, and then people change their minds. And most of the time what it means is that people are voting on false information and, or worries that are not in their best interest. So those are worth pointing out again, too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and I think I skipped one part of one of the questions. It says, can we prove a direct link to corporate campaign contributions, meaning a direct link between contributions and laws that are actually passed? In most cases, it's hard to find at this point, like really obvious quid pro quo in the sense that a lobbyist gives such and such amount of money to somebody and says, I will only give this to you if you vote this way. But there are lots of examples where this is essentially what is happening. I'm trying to think of, Caitlin, do you have anything at your fingertips that you can bring up? I mean, all the stuff we just discussed pretty much is in that category, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not that hard to prove that link for people. I mean, my experience, and I bet your experience is similar, Kaya, that, when you start talking to people about this, it's easy to find the people who this totally resonates and makes a lot of sense. And in some ways, those are kind of the first folks that we're looking for. And then, there are people who need to be maybe convinced a little bit more. But on the whole, remember that 80% of Americans were opposed to the Citizens United ruling when they found out about it in polling, and this was, mainstream. Everybody, even Republicans, were, almost 75%. I think actually Republicans were 65%, and it was Democrats who were 75%, but still 65% of Republicans opposed to this ruling. So I just say that to point out that, we don't necessarily need to make our jobs harder than they really are, because I think that this, in a lot of ways, is common sense to people, and part of the point of doing these creative actions is that you don't need as many facts and figures because you're kind of illustrating something that really resonates with people anyway.
Yeah, really, and thanks, Galen. Yeah, it really does resonate. And I mean, I think there's several polls been done, but I think you're referring to the Washington Post poll that was done right after the Citizens United decision. And I'm pretty sure it was actually 75% of Republicans, 80% of independents, and 85% of Democrats, or something like that. So it really is, and just through my own experience, certainly talking to people, here where I live, even the people that don't have any idea about Citizens United or corporate personhood per se, most people do get that something is broken in our political system, and that large special interests, especially large corporations, have too much power, and they may not have all of the details to fill out exactly why that is. But yeah, usually you don't get too many people that are going to argue that campaign contributions do have an effect on the outcomes that we see in terms of laws and policies. So, it's not bad to get examples, but at the same time, yeah, don't get too hung up on on that unless it's something that you're likely to have to really be arguing in your skill. Like if you're looking for a specific example, sure, but I agree that most people really do get that. Okay, so moving on in these, we've got just a few more minutes, so I'm going to try to see if we can move through these a little quicker. This is just a comment. It would be great if Move to Men could sponsor a contest for the best videotape skit and have a cash prize. Do we have any supporters like Tom Hartman who might fund a winning prize? That way we could motivate people to write skits and get them up on YouTube. I think that's a great idea. I don't know what Tom Hartman thinks about that particular thing, but he definitely is in support of fixing this problem, so might be. Great idea. Let's see, can you email us the PowerPoint for this presentation? It is more helpful than the recording since we can go through them at our own pace. Generally, we have not been emailing out the PowerPoints. Caitlin, what do you want to?
Well, actually, if someone is, and Mary Beth is part of an official affiliate, if someone's part of an official affiliate, then I generally have, so you can email us offline, and I think that we can do that, especially as a PDF. If, since there's a lot of folks we don't know here on the call, not necessarily something that we do in that instance, but when someone's, already working with us and we know that they have a local group, then it seems to me like that's okay.
Yeah, and just to confirm, Caitlin, most folks are not able to see all these comments that are put on here, right? These are just us seeing them?
They don't see them until I display them, which I have been doing, actually, just to make it easy.
Displaying the comments? Okay.
Only after you ask it.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'll just keep going over them then. So there's one that says, I think we should emphasize T-shirts. They're walking billboards, and I completely agree. I think T-shirts are great. Also, somebody says, this is great. How does the fundraising work? What do we do with the money? Well, how fundraising works is basically, I mean, however you fundraise is probably going to be similar to how you fundraise for other local groups. I mean, when I'm talking about fundraising here, I'm talking about fundraising for your local group. There will probably be various, depending on what you're fundraising for, there may be various legal requirements that you meet. So chances are, at a minimum, you want to open up a bank account in your organization's name and have somebody who's a treasurer and, that kind of thing. But in terms of how you do it, you can do it through events. You can do it by approaching, individuals who might want to contribute. You could, put a link on your website to PayPal. There's various ways you can do fundraising. In terms of what you do with the money, that's up to you. I mean, probably what you want to do with it, of course, is to fund things that are going to help you succeed more and get the word out and grow your organization, etc. So a lot of these things that I've been discussing are going to have some cost to them. If you want to put together a float or, costumes or whatever, there is some cost there. It may be somebody's willing to just do an in-kind contribution, essentially, and fund that for you, but it might be that you need to pay people back for that too, So, yeah. Caitlin, do you want to
I can work with folks to work out those details. And if folks are fundraising in the name of Move to Amend, then we ask folks to go through the affiliation process before you start doing that, just because that way we can make sure that we have all our ducks in order. But in terms of, we don't have a requirement that you need to send the money to national. Folks in Florida, I think, are going to start to maybe do some fundraising and do that. And, of course, we welcome that because we do have lots of expenses. But our affiliates are pretty autonomous, and especially in terms of raising and spending money, that's not something that we, require a percentage of or anything like that.
Great. Okay. Here, this question says, so the purpose here is to organize, to educate people. This is good to do before a movement for constitutional amendment. What phase is the constitutional amendment movement at? Do we have any specific amendment? Will anyone introduce it in Congress? Isn't the federal level the first step? Then the states must ratify it. I'm wondering about strategy and timing at these levels. Okay, yeah, I can answer that. So basically, the first step basically is to organize people and mobilize them at the local level. At least that's how Move to Amend is envisioning it. And the reason is because eventually we need to get 3/4 of all states to ratify any amendment. So we will need a lot of popular support to actually do this because, as we all know, there's a lot of powerful interests on the other side of this issue from us. In terms of where we're at and whether we have language, right now, basically, we are in the process of drafting language for an amendment. So we basically have not come up with language at an earlier point in time because we wanted to be basically inclusive and to hear, different folks' views and all before settling on final language. So for us, we don't yet have a language, but we will presumably pretty soon. Also, in terms of isn't the federal level the first step? Well, technically you can start the amendment process off, officially start it off, in one of two ways. You can either do it through the federal Congress, where both houses of the legislature need to vote by 2/3 majority to propose an amendment, or you can start it off via the states, where 2/3 of all state legislatures need to vote to call a constitutional convention, at which point one is held, and whatever comes out of there then is a proposed amendment. In either case, you need 3/4 of states to ratify it. So basically, by the end of the day, we need a lot of people in favor, a lot of states to vote for this, and the only way that we really see this happening is to have people mobilized across the country. So really, mobilizing and organizing at the local level is the first step. Go from there then to the state level, and go from there to kind of up towards the federal level. Caitlin, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just suggest that, Suzanne, you take a look and watch the orientation webinar that we did back in March, which you can find through our website at MoveToAmend/webinars. All of the archives are there. And that webinar was basically devoted to our strategy of movement building and kind of where we're coming from and how we see this happening. And so you can get more info there. And that would be true for anybody. You could all get more information. If you weren't part of that meeting, we kind of tried to lay that groundwork in that session.
Yeah. Okay. Then got a few things. I'd like to be able to present the issue in the following way. Don't you think we should be able to pass laws that require ... Well, we can't do that, and here's why ... and link this discrepancy to corporate rights. Well, yeah, good idea. And if you come up with good kind of arguments in that respect, feel free to send them our way. But yes, that is definitely one way to present the issue. Another question, has anyone held a study group with their chapter or affiliate? I was thinking that could be another but fairly passive action. And the answer is yes. Actually, a number of folks have held study groups. There is a good study group curriculum. I believe it's up on our web. I know it's up on our website somewhere. In a minute, Caitlin can tell you where, that the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom has put together. Caitlin, where is? That's just a corporate personhood. I don't think that actually includes Citizens United unless it's been updated. But
right, yeah, it's a little bit older, but we could actually probably. I think that they're actually working on doing an update, but I'm not sure how high on the priority list that is. But if you go to the toolkit, Carrie, you can find it's a 10-session study guide. We actually normally do it in 5 and just have 2 sessions per time, so you can go a little bit quicker through it, and it gives good background. And absolutely, it's a great way for an affiliate to start off and help get everyone on the same page, bring in some new public folks who might want to learn more before they start acting, or you could do it at the same time as you're holding events and things like this.
Here's another comment. States do have legal requirements on raising money. You may have to form a 501c3 or corporation in order to do this. There are definitely legal requirements, and that is something you should look into locally for your own, get legal advice that is applicable to your local area, to your state. It is not always necessary to form a 501c3. In many cases, you don't have to do that. So, definitely look into the local legal environment. Again, I think this is something that if you're having trouble with it, we may be able to help. We being, talk to Caitlin, and there's other folks that may be able to help. But yeah, you definitely do want to make sure that you're in compliance with whatever laws there are for what you want to do with the money. And as soon as you start spending money towards like an electoral purpose, like say you have a referendum campaign that you're organizing towards, then the restrictions get more restrictive.
Right. You can have an unincorporated association in any state, and really all you need is a tax ID number, and then you can open a bank account. And as long as you're not doing electoral work or granting people a tax donation for their donation, then actually there's a lot of latitude. So that's sort of the baseline, and we need to actually, I think, put some materials together so folks can see just the easy steps to do that. It's on the list.
It is, and I've been working on it, but I haven't quite gotten it done yet, so my apologies. Okay, and then last question that I've got here is, how do I find my closest affiliate? That one's actually fairly easy. Actually, let me let Caitlin answer that, because I'm not sure if you rearranged the website since I last looked at this. I know you've made some changes.
There's not a place online right this second to find the affiliates. You can see where we've passed resolutions, and so that's another thing that we should get up there. But I can tell you right now, Larry, that there aren't any affiliates in Texas right now. And so whenever somebody asks me that question and there isn't one, I throw it back to you and say, you could start an affiliate, and you could do that really easily by just bringing together a group of your friends in your living room to get yourself started. And there's a link on our website on every page on the right side, start a local group, with just 5 easy steps to get going. And I'd be happy to help you out more. That's kind of what our field organizing team is for. And it'd be great to have some folks in Texas.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. And yeah, so the thing is, we used to have like a state level search just for people not in Texas. The state level search, is that no longer the case?
Oh, is that what you meant? Yeah, you can still do that, and it's on the right hand side, right underneath the blue bar, state by state information, and so you can look at your state and you can see if there is an affiliate and or a contact, a state coordinator yet. But I just know that there isn't in Texas. But you're right. Sorry, Kaya.
That's all right. Okay, that looks like the last of the questions, and we are right on time for wrapping things up. So I'd like to just say thanks, everybody, for being on this webinar, and if any questions come up later that that didn't occur to you during the webinar, of course, feel free to send them our way using that link or rather the email address or that phone number that I covered at the end of the presentation. Caitlin, do you have any closing things?
The survey also asks if there's any questions, so if you think of anything, that'd be great. And when we close this out, you'll automatically go to it, and then when you're done with the survey, you'll automatically be dropped into our 4th of July brand new page, and so you can see it there. And then this webinar the recording of it will be available on our webinar page this evening, so you can send it to anybody or watch it again if you want. And yeah, thanks for being here. All right, so I guess we're done.